Greetings and welcome to Southside Help Center Show. One, would really like to thank everyone for tuning in. This is an opportunity for you to get yourself a pen and a piece of paper. If you have any questions, take them down. One, we really would like to thank everyone for tuning in. This is an opportunity because, you know, we've been talking about the mentoring program at the Southside Help Center. We've been talking about the Urban Scouts. We've been talking about having the opportunity to, put these things together. We're talking about real life. We're talking about real coping skills for our African American males. We're talking about how do we get these brothers some skills so that we can stop our guys from going to jail. It's a variety of different things that we want to do. On the 12th, February the 12th is our open house. We'll be at the Southside Help Center. We'll be there from 4 to 6 o'clock. We're going to be talking about mentoring. We're going to be talking about anger management. We're going to be talking about violence prevention. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different things. What we did today is we're down here at the station and we're doing a show. I wanted people to understand the importance of anger management. What should anger management really look like? What are we going to start to do to train our boys, to teach our kids? I want to give y'all a look at this piece that we put together. Most of the stuff that we do, we want to make sure that we're doing enough visuals. That means so that they can make the connections from the words to what they see to the change of the behaviors. We're going to go through this process real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on this board when we start talking about anger management, some of the things that we're doing and how innovative the workshops are that we're going to have at the Southside Help Center. That's why it's important that you guys start looking at how do you get your young brothers into these workshops? How do you as parents get into these workshops? It's important. Southside Help Center has been around since 1987. Betty Smith is our founder. She had a vision. Vanessa Smith is our executive director. She continues that vision. So with that, I am truly honored and grateful to be able to continue to make this happen for us. So with the mentoring program that we have at Southside Help Center, this is one of the workshops we're going to present. This is an anger management workshop. Our anger management workshops are going to be a little bit different than what people are accustomed to or people are used to. Why? Because if we don't start teaching real life skills, if we don't start teaching and becoming real innovative with our ability to teach our kids, with our ability to translate these messages to these kids, guess what? We're not going to get any changes. We want to do prevention as well as intervention. So if we start to prevent some of these circumstances, you'll be surprised the impact that we'll have in our communities. So it's important. So if you can, tune in. If you know someone else, call them. Tell them to get on the lines. Tell them to check us out because this is important. And I want you guys to get this message not just for our young people, but for our parents. When we start with our anger management, one of the things they talk about in our schools, they talk about in everywhere we go, they said that as African Americans, our kids always go from 0 to 10. That's the number one thing that they say about us, about our kids, is we go from 0 to 10. Why do we go from 0 to 10? So many times, people miss a lot of the different variables that make that happen. When you look at this board, we're talking about from 0 to 10, we're talking about anger. One of the things that happen is when our kids, so many of them are sitting in the hallways, so many of them are being put out of classrooms because they can't control themselves. They can't control their anger. And the first thing we say is they got an anger management problem. One of the things is when you look at anger management going from 0 to 10, one of the things we talk about, when you get to 10, you start to involve X factors. What is X factors? You go from 0 to 10, you may wind up pulling a gun. You may wind up shooting someone. You may wind up killing someone. That's one of the X factors. The other thing is, as an X factor, you may wind up pulling a knife. You may wind up stabbing someone. You may wind up taking someone's life. And the other thing is at the very bottom, you'll see that some of the X factors where you wind up being put in the grave. So these are the X factors that we're talking about, and how do we then begin to eliminate and remove some of the X factors with our young African American males? One of the programs or one of the workshops we do is anger management with the Southside Help Center. Come, bring your young brothers, bring yourself, learn some of these techniques. If we don't start to give our kids more innovation, if we don't start to teach our children truly on how to make better decisions before they actually commit the acts, we are truly in a state of emergency, and that won't change. I'm gonna break this down, so I'm gonna slow down just a little bit so I can break down this anger management as I see it. One of the things is, like I said, when our kids go from 0 to 10, they wind up with the X factors. Once you get to the X factors, anything can happen. You can wind up killing someone, being killed yourself, or you can wind up in a penitentiary. I met a young brother, he was 37. Told me he had been out of jail for 2 weeks. I said, well, how long had you been locked up? He told me 20 years. So when he was 17, he made a decision, a bad decision. He committed a murder, and he wound up doing 20 calendar years. I said, you know, as we look at how our kids react and respond, what are some of the things we can do? What are some of the steps we can put in to change that particular behavior? When I ask a lot of my adult males, and this is for anybody watching, brothers, this is a question I ask you. What are the steps in between 0 to 10? What are some of the steps that you can put in from 0 to 10 that may make a difference, that make someone do something else? And I ask that question, it's always a pause. Because as men, if we're never taught steps from 0 to 10, then how do we put them in? Now, here's the thing. As we add them, I talk about how do you add steps. You look at, okay, what are some of the first things you want to do if you find yourself in a bad situation? I always say report. I mean, tell someone else that this set of circumstances is going on. So report that situation. What happens when you put that step 1 in to report something? It lifts up half of the weight off of you, because now someone else is aware of the circumstances that you find yourself in. They may cause you to react or overreact or do something that you might not normally do. I always talk about the first step is to let someone know that you're going through whatever it is you're going through, so that you can actually get some help with that problem. You'll be surprised at people who are willing to help you. Second step, I always say step 2, report. Report it again. That means tell someone that this is happening to you. If it happens again, this is what you're going to do. So you look at what step 3 is. Step 3 is consequences. So if you tell me, Mr. Cherry, I'm dealing with this particular situation, and if it doesn't change, I'm gonna wind up busting his head, or I'm gonna shoot him, or I'm gonna do this, that, and the third. Now it's up to me as an individual, as an adult, to help them with that set of circumstances. So now how do I do that? Well, I'm going to look at what is causing this problem and what we can do to make changes. This is what I'm talking about when we talk about intervention. When we start intervening in situations and circumstances, not seeing them and just ignoring them. We have a responsibility to our young people to do something different. As teachers, as educators, as brothers, as fathers, as uncles, as mentors, we have to do something different. And one of the things is allow them that window to talk about their problems so that we can probably help them. So if you add in report, then consequences, you can always look at what is step 4. We can be creative and innovative in how we add the steps in, brothers, but we're talking about giving them at least 3 or 4 things they can do before they respond or react, because what does it do? By the time they get to step 5, this is what happens. Now they have the power to think. You hear what I'm saying? If they get to 5, now they have the power to think. This is what we're trying to get our kids to do. We're trying to give them some real viable solutions and some real viable coping skills, because we're not always able to change a set of circumstances. That means how someone may be living. We're not always able to change it. But if we teach them how to cope with it, then maybe they can maintain it till which time those circumstances do change. We have to be the ones to add in those steps. That's when we're talking about going from 0 to 10. But this is the thing that so many of us miss. This is the thing. By the time a lot of our kids get to school, this is what happens. I'm going to snatch this off real quick. This is what happens. Now let me say to you, so many times, by the time our kids get to school, they have dealt with so many circumstances on the outside that they when they get to school, they're not on 0. And that's why people say they go from 0 to 10. They got anger management problems. They can't control themselves. And we always pointing the finger at them. And the reality of it is, a lot of our kids, by the time they get to school, they already on 5. Why are they already on 5? 1, because they may have to come to school dealing with gangs. They may have to walk through a gauntlet of dealing with gangs in order to even get to school. So by the time they get to school, well, guess what? They're not on 0. They on 1. They on 2. A lot of our young people are dealing with poverty situations and issues. What does that mean? Now, poverty, it works a number of different ways. So when you look at your definition of poverty, it may be a little bit different. We always think of poverty as all of us living in poverty, and it just means below standards or less than. But the reality of it is poverty have a number of different meanings, but so many of our kids live in poverty. What does poverty mean? That means that one, last night, they may not have eaten. They may not have had a meal last night, so by the time they get to school, they're excited about just getting that breakfast. You have to look at what's going on with our young people that put them in a position that they're being put in. So many times by the time they get to school, they may have had to deal with gangs. They may have had to deal with poverty. The other thing they may have had to deal with, they may have had to deal with bullying. What does that mean? By the time they get to school, sometime they had to deal with bullying. So yeah, that's going to affect them. That means you may think those kids are coming to school going from 0 to 10, but they're not. A lot of time those kids come to school, and by the time they get to school, they on 5 already. So it don't take nothing to set them off. I know abuse is misspelled, so don't be calling talking about I can't spell abuse. I missed the B. I'm telling y'all that now, but a lot of our kids are being abused. And that right there takes them to another level. By the time they get to school, sometime our kids are already on 5. Something may happen and it set them off, and the first thing we said, they went from 0 to 10. The reality of it is they did not go from 0 to 10. They got to school on 5. How do we start to take some of these things out? Meaning, how do we help them dealing with gangs? How do we help them looking at poverty situation or poverty situations? I got a caller. Caller. Okay, we got a call on the air. Let's go ahead and take that call. Caller. I can hear you. Speak up a little bit.
You go to school and you're on 10, how do you go from 10 to 0?
Okay, I got a caller said if you go to school and you're on 10, how do we get you back to 0? This is the one thing that we've been talking about over and over again. That's why if you notice in the book, in the center of the board, it talks about back to 0. How do we get our kids back to 0? That's what our mentoring program focuses on and targets. We want to know, how do we get our kids back to 0? If we get them back to 0, we give them a fair chance. We give them a better chance of survival. So we have to look at, how do we take the gangs out of the equation? Our kids should be entitled to a safe and healthy working environment and learning environment. We have to look at, how do we take those gangs out of that? The other thing is poverty. How do we take that poverty situation out? We first have to know and recognize that this is some of our kids' circumstances, so we have to look at, one, listening to them. We have to look at what we can do to help the parents. So parents, help us help you. We understand that sometimes it ain't even the parents' fault. We don't know what their circumstances is. So they may be dealing with poverty situations, but once we know it, what can we do to help that situation? I think about when we were coming up as kids, we'd be running to school to get to breakfast. If we missed breakfast, we was sick because we may have had a meal the night before. And breakfast was vital to us because it's the only thing that we may have had. We turn our coats inside out. Y'all remember that? And we go back through the line to get another breakfast, another donut, another whatever they were serving because we were hungry. The other thing, couldn't wait for lunch because this may be the last meal that I actually get today. So you're looking at so many situations where our kids are dealing with poverty. You look at bullying. Sometimes our kids are being bullied, and if you know every day I go to school, I got to deal with this same bully. So in your mind, you've already prepared yourself to be able to deal with a set of circumstances that could cause you a lot of harm. Not only cause you that, when those circumstances happen with our young people, that stuff builds up in them. And when it builds up in them, sometime, one, they may go into the X factors. Because I know I got to deal with this same set of circumstances every single day. And it's starting to affect me. It's starting to affect me mentally. We start talking about our young people who have mental health illnesses or issues. Why do they have mental health issues? Because they're dealing with so many of these things that they have to deal with every day trying to just make it to school. When we talk about anger management, this is just a chip in the bucket of what we're going to be talking about. Again, my whole goal is, how do we get them back to 0? Southside Health Center has been providing this type of service for many years, and I'm grateful I've been a part of it for a lot of those years. And I'm thankful that they want to continue that legacy of great services for our young people, for our young brothers. So please, if you're available, February the 12th, come to the center. We're going to have food. We're going to have drinks. Meet some of the board members. Meet the mentors. We want you to come out and enjoy yourself and have a great time. February the 12th is going to be from 4 to 6, 10420 South Halsted. If you would like more information, call Southside Help Center. Go on our website, www.southsidehelp.org, or you can go to urbanscouts.net, and it'll also give you more information. Please, if you have an opportunity, come out, be a part of this. Brothers, if you're able to come out, brothers, and support this. If you would like to be a part of Urban Scouts and support this, by all means, contact me, come by the center, find out what needs to happen. We truly would like to thank everyone for tuning in. Until we see you again, we bid you peace.